Imagine the raw power of a voice, so moving that even Beyoncé can't hold back her tears. In today's story, we witness a moment that leaves the world in awe, proving that dreams do come true in the most unexpected ways. What happens when a young, black artist gets the chance to perform for the queen of music herself, Beyoncé? A voice that's been silenced for years finally breaks free, and what follows will leave you speechless. As this rising star steps onto the stage, they're about to deliver the performance of a lifetime. But it's not just a crowd that's moved. Beyoncé, one of the greatest voices of all time, can't hold back her tears. The world is about to witness something no one could have predicted, and this performance will change everything for this artist. Prepare for a moment so powerful. It will remind you that sometimes a single voice can change the world. Before we dive deeper into this gripping story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Epic Story Moments. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Like, share, and comment to support more. Incredible stories like this. The small, dimly lit room was buzzing with excitement as the young singer nervously adjusted the mic. This was it, the moment they had dreamed of for years. A chance to perform for none other than Beyoncé. It wasn't just any performance. This was the opportunity of a lifetime to showcase their voice to someone who had influenced millions around the world. The crowd had gathered for an exclusive event, and the energy was electric. But the focus wasn't just on Beyoncé. Tonight, all eyes were on this rising star, a black artist who had spent countless hours perfecting their craft. From long nights in small venues to relentless hustle on social media, this artist had always believed their voice would one day be heard. Now, standing in front of the icon herself, the weight of this moment was almost too much to bear. As the singer began, their voice started with a soft, hesitant note. But as the song built, so did the power behind each word. The melody flowed from their soul, and with each note, it became clear that this wasn't just a performance. It was a raw, emotional release. The story of their struggles, triumphs, and dreams poured out into the room, wrapped in a voice that could only be described as both haunting and beautiful. Beyoncé, sitting just a few feet away, was drawn in immediately. Her eyes locked on the singer, and something in her expression shifted. It wasn't just admiration. There was something deeper, something that resonated with her. She could see the passion, the determination in every note. It reminded her of her own journey, her own struggles as an artist, and the hurdles she had to overcome to get where she was today. As the singer reached the bridge of the song, their voice cracked, strained with emotion, and that was when it happened. Beyoncé, usually composed, sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't just the power of the voice. It was the story behind it. The weight of the artist's journey was too much for her to hold back. For a moment, the room fell silent, as if the very air had thickened with the raw intensity of the performance. The young singer, unaware of the effect they were having on the legend in front of them, finished the song with a final, trembling note. The room stood still, holding its breath. For a moment, no one knew what to do. And then Beyoncé stood up. Malik James, a 22-year-old artist from a small town in Alabama, had always known that his road to success would be anything but easy. His town, a quiet, modest place with few opportunities, was a world away from the glittering lights of Los Angeles or New York, where dreams of stardom often come true. But for Malik, music had always been his calling. His love for singing began as a child, singing along to songs his mother played on an old record player in their small living room. The music would fill the space, but it was the way it filled his heart that made him feel like he was destined for something more. Growing up with a single mother, who worked tirelessly as a nurse, Malik quickly learned that life was not going to hand him anything. Money was always tight, and the chances to pursue his passion were few and far between. There were moments when he felt like his dreams were too big for the world around him, like he was just another black boy from a poor town with a wild ambition. But his mother's unwavering belief in him kept him going. She would often say, "You have a gift, Malik. Don't you ever let anyone make you feel small. It was these words that became his anchor through the years of struggle and rejection. By the time Malik was 18, he had already faced his fair share of challenges. He performed in every local dive bar and small club he could find, hoping someone would take notice. But the music industry was unforgiving, especially for a black artist trying to make it on his own terms. Malik knew he didn't fit the stereotypical mold of what mainstream music labels were looking for. He didn't have the polished image or the perfect sound that many industry executives were drawn to. He wasn't the type of artist who would change his style to fit the mold. His music was raw, real, and deeply personal. It spoke of the struggles of growing up in a tight-knit but often overlooked community, and he wasn't willing to compromise his authenticity for fame. Still, the rejections piled up. Some nights, he would finish his performance in an almost empty bar, questioning if his voice would ever be heard. Yet every time he felt the urge to give up, he would hear his mother's voice in his head, reminding him to keep going. He kept writing music, posting covers on social media, and hoping that anyone would recognize his talent. His social media following grew slowly at first, but the more he shared his story, the more people began to listen. His voice, full of emotion and grit, started to resonate with people who understood what it meant to dream big, even when the world didn't seem to care. And then it happened. Malik received an email one afternoon that would change everything. Beyoncé's team had seen one of his viral videos. They had heard his voice, and they wanted him to perform for her at an exclusive event. Malik couldn't believe it. For years, he had dreamed of the moment when he would finally meet Beyoncé, the artist who had not only shaped the music industry, but had become a beacon of empowerment for black artists everywhere. He had always admired her resilience, her commitment to authenticity, and her ability to break barriers in a world that often tried to silence voices like his. This was the opportunity he had worked so hard for. It wasn't just about performing for Beyoncé. It was about proving to himself and to the world that his voice mattered. His life had led him to this moment, and it wasn't one he was about to waste. As the days leading up to the performance passed, Malik couldn't help but feel the weight of what was at stake. But there was also excitement, an undeniable feeling that he was about to do something that would change his life forever. The night of the performance arrived, and Malik stood backstage, nervously pacing. The crowd was buzzing with anticipation, the energy electric in the air. This wasn't just another gig. It was a performance of a lifetime. In the crowd sat some of the biggest names in music, but Malik's eyes were fixed on one person, Beyoncé. He could see her in the front row, calm and composed, but there was a warmth in her gaze that made him feel like he had a chance to do something incredible. When it was his turn to take the stage, Malik's heart pounded in his chest. As he stepped into the spotlight, the world seemed to stand still. He was about to sing for the woman who had been his inspiration, his guide through the darkness. The crowd fell silent as Malik began to sing, his voice trembling at first. But as the song went on, his confidence grew. The lyrics poured from him, raw and vulnerable, telling the story of his struggles, his hopes, and the journey that had led him here. Beyoncé sat in the front row, her eyes locked on Malik. She could feel the power of his voice, a voice full of raw emotion, of pain and triumph, of hope and resilience. As the song built to its climax, Beyoncé's expression began to change. It wasn't just admiration that shone through her face. It was something deeper. She could see herself in his performance, in the way he poured everything he had into his art. It was the same journey she had taken years ago, the same fight to be heard in a world that often tried to silence her. As Malik's voice reached its peak, something unexpected happened. Tears began to well up in Beyoncé's eyes, and she couldn't hold them back. She wiped them away, but more came until she was visibly overcome with emotion. This was no ordinary performance. It was a soul-stirring, heart-wrenching moment that connected two artists across time and space. Malik had poured his entire being into that song, and Beyoncé felt it deep in her soul. The room was silent as the final note rang out, and for a moment, it seemed like time had stopped. Malik stood there, unsure of what to do next. He had finished his song, but the world around him felt like it had frozen. He didn't know if he had done enough to impress Beyoncé, or if he had left an impact. But then, without a word, she stood up. Malik stood backstage, his heart racing, as the sound of the crowd grew louder. He could hear the muffled buzz of whispers, the anticipation thick in the air. The energy in the room was palpable. This wasn't just another performance. This was a moment he had been working for his entire life. He wiped his palms on his jeans, his hands slick with sweat. He felt a mixture of excitement and dread. What if his voice cracked? What if the nerves overtook him and he couldn't deliver? But then he reminded himself of everything that had brought him here. His mother's words, the countless nights spent perfecting his craft, the long road he had traveled just to be in this moment. The event was being held in an exclusive, intimate venue, elegant, almost serene, with soft golden lights hanging above. The crowd of industry insiders, music legends, and influencers sat in hushed anticipation, their eyes fixed on the stage. And right at the front, Beyoncé sat, calm yet focused, her gaze unwavering. She was a beacon in this sea of high-profile faces. To Malik, she was more than just a music icon. She represented everything he aspired to be, someone who had overcome every barrier, every obstacle, to stand at the top of the world. His name was called, and it was as though his heart stopped. He took a deep breath, one last time, before walking out onto the stage. The spotlight hit him, the warm glow enveloping him. But all he could focus on was a woman sitting front and center. This was Beyoncé, and he had to give her everything he had. As he stood there, mic in hand, the crowd grew quiet. There was no need for introductions, no need for any words. This was his chance to speak through music. The opening chords of his song played, the piano keys resonating softly as Malik's voice filled the air. The song he had chosen wasn't just any song. It was deeply personal. Every word carried the weight of his journey, the struggles he'd faced as a black artist trying to break into an industry that wasn't always welcoming. The lyrics spoke of his mother's sacrifices, the years of rejection, and the hope he still held on to, no matter how difficult the road seemed. It was a kind of raw, soulful ballad that made your chest tighten, that made your heart beat a little faster. From the first note, Malik's voice was full of power, and yet it carried a vulnerability that was impossible to ignore. His range was flawless, but it was the emotion behind each note that truly captivated everyone in the room. The power of his voice wasn't just in the sound. It was in the way he conveyed every ounce of feeling. The high notes soared with effortless beauty, and the low notes seemed to ripple with pain and longing. He was singing not just for the people in the room, but for himself, for everything he had worked for. Beyoncé's eyes were fixed on him from the moment he started. Her expression, at first neutral, slowly began to shift as the song unfolded. She could feel the weight of his voice, the sheer emotion he was pouring into every word. It was as if Malik was telling the story of his entire life. And in those few minutes, Beyoncé could see the struggles, the victories, and the unrelenting fight to be heard. As the song reached its climax, Malik's voice broke, straining with emotion as he hit a powerful note that resonated through the entire room. His chest tightened, his breath shaky, but he pushed through. This was the moment he had been waiting for. His soul was laid bare, and he hoped that those in the audience, especially Beyoncé, could feel the truth of his journey. And then it happened. Beyoncé, ever the composed queen, began to visibly soften. Her eyes glistened with emotion, and as the song reached its peak, a tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, but it was clear she was moved, deeply moved, by the rawness of the performance. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of admiration and empathy. It wasn't just his talent that had moved her. It was the truth in his voice, the way he bared his soul on that stage. The room had fallen completely silent, all eyes on the young artist and the powerful woman in the front row. Malik, lost in his own emotions, didn't even notice Beyoncé's reaction at first. But as the final note lingered in the air, he looked up, and for a split second, their eyes met. Beyoncé's gaze held his, steady and full of unspoken words. She was no longer just a fan of his talent. She was a witness to his struggle, his passion, and the undeniable strength of his voice. She stood up, slowly, her applause the first sound to break the silence. The entire room followed suit, and soon the applause was deafening. Malik stood frozen, unable to believe what had just happened. His heart was racing, his chest tight with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had done it. He had performed not just for Beyoncé, but for himself. The emotions that had swirled inside him, fear, doubt, hope, were all laid bare, and in that moment, it felt like the world had finally seen him for who he truly was. As the final note of Malik's song hung in the air, the silence in the room was deafening. For a moment, it felt as though the entire world had paused, as if they were all collectively holding their breath, waiting for the next thing to happen. Malik stood there, his hands trembling slightly, his heart racing in his chest. The energy in the room was electric, but it was also heavy with emotion. He had poured every ounce of his soul into that performance, and now he was waiting, hoping that the people who mattered would hear him. Beyoncé, sitting just a few feet away, was the first to break the silence. Slowly, she rose to her feet. Her eyes were glistening with tears, and she wiped them away quickly, almost as if trying to compose herself. But there was no hiding the emotion that had taken over her. Malik watched as she stood, her presence commanding the room, and he held his breath, unsure of what would happen next. Then, Beyoncé began to clap, slowly at first, but with increasing intensity, until the applause echoed through the entire venue. It wasn't just polite applause. It was a heartfelt, sincere recognition of Malik's performance. The crowd, sensing the power of the moment, quickly followed suit. The sound of clapping grew louder and louder, but Malik could barely hear it. His mind was racing, his body still in disbelief that he had managed to touch the legendary Beyoncé in this way. As the applause continued, Beyoncé approached the stage, her gaze never leaving Malik. She took a step forward, her eyes filled with admiration and respect. When she reached him, she stopped, standing directly in front of him, her face softening with genuine emotion. "You," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "are something special." Malik stood frozen, overwhelmed by her presence, unsure of how to respond. Beyoncé smiled warmly, almost as if reading his mind. She continued, "I've been in this industry for decades, and I've heard many incredible voices, but what you just did, it was unlike anything I've ever heard before." Her words were not just praise. They were a testament to the raw power of his voice, to the depth of his performance. She took a deep breath, clearly moved by what she had just witnessed. "Your voice, it's not just a gift to you. It's a gift to all of us. And it's voices like yours that remind us of why we do this, why we keep pushing, why we keep fighting." She paused, her eyes shining with sincerity. "You're not just an artist, Malik. You're a force, and the world needs to hear you." Malik could hardly believe what he was hearing. His mind was spinning, trying to process the words that Beyoncé had just spoken. Here was the woman he had admired for years, the woman who had changed the game for black artists, and she was telling him that he was part of that legacy, that he was part of something bigger than himself. Beyoncé continued, her tone becoming even more personal, almost as if she were speaking directly to him as a fellow artist. "As black artists, we face challenges that others can't even begin to understand. But we also have a power, an energy that is unstoppable. Your voice, Malik, is a testament to that power. You've come so far already. But I know this is just the beginning for you." She stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his shoulder, her expression filled with warmth and encouragement. "I want you to know that this industry needs voices like yours. It needs the stories, the raw emotion, the truth that you bring to your music. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you're not enough or that your voice isn't important, because it is, and the world is waiting for you to share it." Her words resonated deeply within Malik. They were not just words of praise. They were a call to action. She had seen something in him, something powerful, and she was encouraging him to keep going, to keep pushing, to not stop until the world recognized his gift. You have a bright future ahead of you, Malik. Don't ever forget that. Beyoncé's voice was filled with authority, but also a sense of deep care and support. I'm telling you right now, your voice will change the world. So keep singing, keep telling your story, keep pushing boundaries, because you're meant for greatness. Malik felt his chest tighten as he fought back tears of his own. The validation, the encouragement, the belief from someone who had been where he was and had overcome it all. It was everything he had needed to hear and more. It wasn't just a compliment. It was a lifeline, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. Beyoncé had fought the same battles, faced the same doubts, and come out on the other side stronger, and now she was telling him to do the same. As she spoke, the room seemed to fade away. It was just Malik and Beyoncé in that moment. Two black artists connected by their shared struggles, their shared passion, and their shared desire to make a difference through their music. Malik couldn't put into words what he was feeling, but he knew one thing for sure. This moment, this encounter, would stay with him for the rest of his life. Finally, Beyoncé gave him one last smile, full of warmth and pride. "Remember this moment," she said. "This is just the beginning." As the crowd began to settle, Malik stood frozen, still trying to process what had just happened. Beyoncé's words, her praise, her encouragement, it was all so overwhelming. He felt as though his legs could barely support him as he walked off the stage. The weight of the moment sinking in, the adrenaline was still pumping through his veins, but it was quickly overtaken by an almost surreal sense of disbelief. He had just performed for Beyoncé. Not only had she heard him, but she had been moved to tears. And now, she was telling him that he had a future in this industry, a future where his voice mattered. Malik leaned against the backstage wall, taking a moment to steady himself. He placed a hand on his chest, trying to calm his rapid heartbeat. His mind was racing, replaying every second of the performance, every word Beyoncé had spoken. It felt like a dream, a beautiful, impossible dream. But it was real. It had really happened. Tears began to well up in his eyes as the magnitude of the moment hit him. He had always dreamed of this. Growing up in a small town, he had imagined performing in front of his idols, hoping for validation, for recognition. And now, that dream had come true. But it wasn't just any validation. It was from Beyoncé, the queen herself, the person who had inspired him, who had shown him what was possible for black artists in an industry that often overlooked them. To know that she believed in him, that she saw something special in him, was more than he could have ever hoped for. "I did it," he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible as he wiped away the tears that had started to fall. He wasn't sure if he was more overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment or the weight of the opportunity he had just been given. But one thing was certain. His life was about to change forever. Social media buzz. The very next day, a video clip of Malik's performance went viral. The moment where Beyoncé's tears flowed, her reaction to his voice, was captured in perfect clarity. People from all over the world began to share the video, moved by the raw emotion and power of Malik's performance. Social media erupted with praise, with hashtags like #MalikTheVoice and #BeyonceMoveByMalik trending worldwide. Fans from all corners of the globe flooded Malik's social media accounts with messages of love and support. "This is the most powerful performance I've ever seen," one user wrote. "This voice deserves to be heard," said another. The comments poured in from fellow artists, music fans, and people who had never heard of Malik before but were touched by his talent and the sincerity of his performance. Media outlets, from small blogs to major news stations, were quick to pick up on the story. The narrative spread across every platform, each post filled with awe over the magical moment where Beyoncé had been visibly moved by a young black artist's performance. The world had witnessed something extraordinary, and they couldn't get enough of it. Media attention. Within hours, the phone calls started coming in. Malik's inbox exploded with messages as record labels, talent scouts, and even other artists reached out to him. His social media following skyrocketed, with thousands of new fans flocking to his pages. His inbox was flooded with offers from various industry professionals, all eager to sign him, collaborate with him, or help him take his career to the next level. A few days later, Malik found himself in meetings with top music producers, some of the biggest names in the industry. He was offered multiple record deals, each more impressive than the last. But it wasn't just the potential for fame or money that took him by surprise. It was a genuine interest in his music, in his voice, in his story. People weren't just looking at him as another artist to profit from. They were looking at him as someone who had something important to say, someone whose talent could change the game. Celebrities, too, took notice. Big names like Chance the Rapper, Alicia Keys, and even Rihanna tweeted about Malik, offering their congratulations and support. "You've got something special," Chance the Rapper wrote. "Keep pushing. The world is ready for you." As the days passed, Malik found himself thrust into the spotlight. His phone constantly buzzed with new messages. His social media accounts flooded with support. He was featured in interviews, articles, and podcasts, and the music world was abuzz with talk about the young artist who had moved Beyoncé to tears. But amidst all the excitement and the newfound attention, one thing was certain. Malik was no longer just a hopeful artist in the background. He was a rising star, and his journey was just beginning. Beyoncé's endorsement had changed everything for him, giving him the validation and the exposure he needed to finally take the next step in his career. Malik knew that this was only the start of something much bigger, and as he stood in front of the mirror one evening, holding the first of many contracts he would sign in the coming months, he couldn't help but smile. He had made it. His dream was no longer a dream. It was his reality, and he was ready to embrace everything that lay ahead. The journey that had started with a dream, with countless struggles and countless setbacks, had now led him to this moment. And as the music swells, so does his sense of pride. Every dream starts with a spark, but that spark needs fuel. For Malik, it was his voice, his passion, and the belief that, despite all odds, he could make a difference. His story is a testament to the resilience of Black artists, to the power of persistence, and to the importance of never giving up on your dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem. It's a reminder that the world is waiting for your unique voice, your unique story. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one person, to believe in you, to change your life forever. If you were moved by Malik's incredible journey, make sure to hit that like button and share this story with your friends. Don't miss out on more epic stories like this. Subscribe to Epic Story Moments and turn on notifications so you never miss an unbelievable moment. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Malik's journey, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think. And remember, if you have your own dreams and stories, keep pushing forward, because the world is waiting to hear from you